In with vote 37, Advanced Education, Central Management and Services, subvote AE01. Minister Makowski is here with his officials. I would ask that the officials please state their names before speaking into the microphone. And as a reminder, please don't touch the microphones. The Hansard operator will turn your microphone on when you are speaking to the committee. We have a number of officials here. If you wouldn't mind coming forward if you're going to be into a long back and forth on several questions, but you know, we'll just keep it very casual here and work the way it sees fit. We're here for 4 hours this evening, so it's quite a bit of time. If any members would like to take a break, we're open to take a break. We probably will take one halfway through anyway, but if you do need a break, just signal me and let me know. So, Mr. Minister, please introduce your officials and make your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here in front of the Human Services Committee and to speak about the Ministry of Advanced Education's 22-23 budget. To my right is Deputy Minister Kimberly Kratzik and Chief of Staff behind my right shoulder, Amanda Plummer. Other ministry officials here to provide support this evening include to my left David Beam, Assistant Deputy Minister. For my left shoulder, Corinne Burnett, Executive Director of Corporate Finance. Kirk Wasmanetti is here from Executive Director of Student Support Services, Lindell Veach, over my right shoulder. Executive Director of Strategy Planning and Sector Engagement, and Mike Pestle, also over my right shoulder, Executive Director of Sector Management and Relationship. Ministry of Advanced Education is focused on supporting accessible, responsible, sustainable, and accountable post-secondary sector that delivers the high-quality education Saskatchewan students need to be successful to enter the workforce. This budget provides strong support for post-secondary students and institutions. This year, our government's investment of $740.3 million in post-secondary education is $5.6 million higher than last year. Our government is pleased to continue the 21-22 commitment to provide $60 million to the post-secondary education sector over 2 years. This investment will continue to assist the sector to focus on shared priorities, which include recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and the evolution of programming and operations post-pandemic, generating new sources of revenue and reducing expenses, finding new innovative ways to work with other post-secondary institutions, and achieving post-secondary priorities set out in Saskatchewan's growth plan. The multi-year funding commitment provides the post-secondary education sector with greater funding certainty. This investment paves the way for the sector to improve long-term financial sustainability, support growth, and most importantly, provide the best possible education to our students. The signing of last year's Memorandum of Understanding among all the institutions highlighted our willingness to work together to ensure that our sector continues to be accessible, responsive, sustainable, and accountable while maximizing outcomes for students. The 22-23 budget also includes a $4.9 million operating and capital increase to expand nurse training seats by 150. Our 2 nursing programs will have 124 new registered nurses, 10 nurse practitioner seats, and Sask Polytech will offer 60 new psychiatric nursing seats. This expansion is critical to meet the growing need for health professionals in Saskatchewan to support the health system, capital projects, and to address the impacts from the pandemic. I'm pleased the post-secondary education sector continues to be a vital partner in addressing the health human resource needs of our province. In collaboration with the Ministries of Health and Immigration and Career Training, our government is also working to support the health system through additional recruitment, retention, and training efforts. The budget also includes the interprovincial agreements with post-secondary institutions in Alberta and British Columbia to create opportunities for Saskatchewan learners to enroll in high-demand health sciences programs that are not available in the province. Advanced Ed is investing $3 million to secure 110 seats for Saskatchewan's learners in 8 specialized health professions. This collaborative approach with those 2 provinces helps ensure our province continues to deliver high-quality health care to the people of Saskatchewan. On the operating capital side, more than $680 million will be provided in operating and capital grants to post-secondary institutions. This includes $445.9 million to the U of S, U of R, and the federated and affiliated colleges. $168.5 million to SAS Polytech, SIT, and DTI, Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies, and Dumont Technical Institute, for those that may be watching. $35.3 million to Saskatchewan regional colleges, and $31 million for capital projects and preventive maintenance and renewal throughout the post-secondary sector. This includes providing $4 million in capital design funding for the Saskatoon campus renewal project at SAS Polytechnic. $1.1 million to support the capital needs of the 150-seat nurse expansion at the University of Regina and Polytechnic. $1 million for planning and design work at the dental clinic at the University of Saskatchewan. $200,000 to support the initial assessment of the auditorium renewal project at Great Plains College, and $2.2 million, or 10% increase for preventative maintenance and renewal funding to benefit post-secondary education institutions. In terms of supporting students, this budget continues to provide strong support for post-secondary students by investing nearly $38 million in direct financial supports. $27 million is provided through the student loan program, ensuring support for students who need it most. This funding will provide repayable and non-repayable financial assistance to more than 20,000 students. The budget provides $10.6 million for scholarships, including $7.1 million for the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship, which has increased from 500 to 750 for eligible students announced in the last budget. In addition, $3.5 million will support the Saskatchewan Innovation and Opportunity Scholarship, French language scholarships, the Queen Elizabeth II Scholarship, and the Scholarships of Honor. In 22-23, our government will invest $102.6 million in direct support to students through tax credits, grants, and scholarships. Eligible graduates who stay and work in the province can receive a rebate on tuition fees of up to $20,000 through the Graduate Retention Program. The program is successful and retains Saskatchewan graduates to help employers build the economy of tomorrow. Since 2008, the GRP has provided $608 million in benefits to more than 75,500 graduates. To ensure we're better able to serve students, a series of projects are being initiated to improve technology. This year, $4.9 million is allocated to transformational information technology projects that will modernize the student financial aid system to provide important financial services to students in a convenient, simple, and flexible way, as well as an enterprise resource planning and student information system for regional colleges and Dumont Technical Institute. Another area of support for students, including $600,000 increase to support the MyTax program and the new Indigenous Pathways Initiative, which will provide students with research and development skills while ensuring Saskatchewan businesses continue to grow. Government is focused on fostering an inclusive post-secondary sector, which includes increasing the enrollment and educational attainment of Indigenous students. Engaging the province's Indigenous population is an important component of the growth plan. And to that end, we are investing $18.6 million in Indigenous post-secondary institutions and programs. On the international education side, we'll continue, we anticipate it will continue to be a key driver in the economic recovery of the province while supporting the growth plan. In November 2021, our government announced its new post-secondary international education strategy, which lays the foundation for a global approach to enhance the province's profile to attract key international markets and new markets. The new strategy positions the province as a destination of choice for international students and researchers. It'll highlight Saskatchewan as a post-secondary sector leader in global markets and destination for trade, immigration, education, and technology. By working to enhance the already respected international reputation of our province's institutions, we'll continue to extend their post-secondary footprint into global markets. The ministry is engaging across government, the sector, and global stakeholders to identify opportunities in existing international trade relationships to promote the province's post-secondary programming. By developing a provincial approach to international education, we can further build the brand of Saskatchewan and, again, supporting the growth plan goals. In 21-22, as part of the international education strategy, our government recently launched the Saskatchewan Agent Training Program and Student Ambassador Program, as well as the International Practitioner Program, which is the first of its kind in Canada. This year, an investment of $150,000 will support the ongoing development and delivery of training program for employees at all designated institutions to become certified international education practitioners. In addition, our government has signed several MOUs with organizations and higher education institutes from around the world to work collaboratively and cooperatively to promote and advance academic and global linkages in areas of information exchange, education exchange, promotion, and research. So in closing, I'd like to thank the sector for their tremendous efforts throughout the last couple of years to ensure students receive a quality education. This budget will help keep Saskatchewan strong with the continuation of unique multi-year investment to all publicly funded post-secondary institutions and more training opportunities for post-secondary students. The ministry will continue to make key investments to ensure post-secondary education is accessible and affordable through scholarships, loans, and grants. In another challenging year, institutions have adapted. New opportunities have emerged in post-secondary education in Saskatchewan. It's back on track. Our goal is a strong, sustainable post-secondary sector that delivers high-quality education to respond to the needs of Saskatchewan students, the economy, and communities now and into the future. Thank you for your indulgence in those opening statements, and I look forward to answering any questions that may come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ms. Bowes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you, Minister, and welcome to your officials. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting most of you yet, and so it's good to see you here. I'm still feeling a bit new to this, so you'll have to pardon me. It's a small opposition, as you know, and we have limited resources, so bear with me. I think I'll start out just generally looking line by line at vote 37 and the subvotes. So starting with AE01, I'm wondering if you can let me know a little bit more about the changes indicated under central services. I just note a $75,000 increase, and just curious where that will be allocated.
So in terms of the, pardon me, my name is David Boehm. I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister with the Ministry of Advanced Education. In terms of the central services, there is a $2,000 adjustment to the Minister's salary for the coming year. The other change is a $75,000 increase that's associated with enterprise IT or information technology. So that's a cost that is passed on to us through Saskatchewan builds and procurement.
Okay, thanks. And can you tell me a bit more about that enterprise IT?
So as Mr. Beam indicated, so SAS Builds and Procurement buys I guess in this case, a Microsoft computer system or program. There's licensing fees on that. It's spread across government. Our share is at $75,000 for that enterprise IT. So computer systems and some of those back office things that happen, but that's through SAS Builds and Procurement. They charge us for our share.
Thanks. And then moving down to allocations under AE02. Certainly for, I mean, we can see with universities, federated and affiliated colleges, we actually have a decrease, a 0.3% decrease. We can see as well with the tech institutes, there's an overall additional, like a 2.5 increase, regional colleges, a 5.2% increase, and then post-secondary capital transfers, we're seeing, I believe it's 5.3, I can't read my writing here, I think that's a 5.3% increase. And so I would like to know what your rationale is for the differences in variance from the different institutions, or I guess the different classifications here, like especially seeing a decrease, as I mentioned, for universities, federated and affiliated colleges, but then, you know, on the upper end, 5.2% increase for regional colleges.
So on that vote, you talked about what you see under universities, federated and affiliated colleges. There is a increase to the MyTax, as I mentioned in my introductory statement, $600,000 increase. We can go into that if you so wish later on. The total now is 1.15 million going towards those scholarships. There's a reduction of 4.27 million in supplementary funding. Now, the little explanation on this one. You know, this is what I would call fall off, not a drop in any operating funding. The 60 million up front is still intact, and that is not touched. This isn't operating dollars. About a decade ago or so, the university both universities wanted to do some borrowing for whatever capital projects they wanted to do in that particular time. We agreed at that point, the government agreed to cover the interest cost for those loans. And so this is simply essentially an amortization schedule. It's not like you pay off any loan, the dollar amount lessens every time you make a payment. And so that's what this reflects. There is less need to service that loan. And so that is the fall off there. There's 2.593 for the 150 nursing seats, as I mentioned, and there's a $443,000 decrease in this part of the vote. And this, again, takes a little bit of explanation. Last year, I think the College of Medicine, in fact, asked for this to separate the clinical from the clinical side and the teaching side of the College of Medicine. Before, it was completely split between advanced ed and health, and to better reflect the money that goes to the clinical side and to the teaching side. Quite a bit of money went over to the health side of the estimates. I can't remember the exact dollar figure. This $443 is the academic renal transplant funding. It should have happened last year, I guess, for whatever reason. It was an oversight or what have you. Call it what you will, but it's clearly a clinical side thing, so the Ministry of Health. So there's no decrease in funding to the College of Medicine, no decrease at all to the funding for the universities for operating on that supplementary funding. Increases for my tax and the nursing seats. So I think that covers the two areas. So why you might see a decrease of 1.520 when you get to the end of the day on those numbers.
Okay. And so you had mentioned the servicing of loans. And so can you let me know what were the dollar amounts of those loans and when were those undertaken?
I'd like to correct, maybe I had said before we just pay the interest, we pay the principal and interest, so excuse me on that. I think I might have misspoke. My officials corrected me here. Thanks for that. So from the U of S, what we have here is from 03, 04, the U of S borrowed 3.6, and then from 04 to 2012, they borrowed $4.7 million on a 15-year term. So the total amount of those loans in that, I guess, agreement, I could say is $135,960,000. The U of R from 03 it was 1.386, and then from 04 to 12 was 1.8 in each of those years. And then 12-13 was 5.387. I'm going to go back to U of S. I might have misspoke. In 12-13, there was a $94.76 million loan. So that, if you're doing the math, I missed that particular side. So again, the bottom line is $135,960,000 from U of S. U of R, $21,173,000. The amortization schedule and what we've sort of been talking about, so from what we have here is from 2021 down to 27, 28. So the U of S, 2021, it was 12.684 million that we spent to cover that loan, and the U of R was 1.61 million. 21-22 U of S 11.91 million, U of R 1.353 million. 22-23, and again we see that large drop off that we've been talking about. 22-23 U of S went down to 7.8 million, U of R 1.185 million. In 23-24, the U of S will drop down again to 1.343 million, U of R to just over a million. 24-25 U of S 884,000, U of R 922,000. 25-26 459,000 U of S, U of R 730,000. 26-27 228,000 U of S, 585,000 U of R. And 27-28 the U of S will completely fall off to zero, U of R 193,000.
Okay, and again, I haven't been around long enough to, I guess, remember this happening, and so I'm just curious for a few more details. Is this standard with institutions in Saskatchewan to be borrowing this significant amount of money from the government? Are there other institutions that are also borrowing similarly, or is it just the universities?
So in terms of the information that's been provided, this took place for about a 10-year period where the institutions were provided room to borrow to take care of preventative maintenance and renewal requirements, with the exception of 2012-13, when the University of Saskatchewan borrowed a fairly significant amount for the academic health sciences building renewal. So that's sort of the background on the approach here. Since 2012-13, the policy has shifted to providing the institutions with preventative maintenance and renewal grants, as opposed to allowing them to borrow. And the borrowing was not from government; it was borrowing that they did on their own. But governments simply, helped out with these principal and interest payments in order to cover these loans.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. All right, and so I guess my question about other institutions and borrowing, then I didn't quite hear an answer there.
In the case of other institutions, no, there's been no borrowing. Well, sorry, I have to back up. There was a small loan that was taken out by, I believe it was maybe Northwest College at one point in time, all paid off, all in the past. But beyond those three institutions, the University of Saskatchewan, University of Regina, and Northwest College, no, the practice was not used with any other institutions.
Okay, thanks. Moving on, under AEO2, we're seeing a pretty significant difference in transfers for public services. And I wonder, in terms of dollar amount, and so I'm wondering if you can let me know what is all included there.
So the adjustment in terms of transfers for public services would be a similar explanation to what we just walked through with respect to the institutions, and in particular, the downward adjustment in these, I think we call them sort of an amortization type schedule, but our payment schedule, the downward reduction in those payment schedules, particularly for the University of Saskatchewan and the University of Regina.
Okay, thanks. And then next line, transfers for public services capital. Yeah, a fairly substantial, significant increase, and I'm wondering if you can detail that.
Yep, so on that line, there is, this is essentially capital changes, so there is an increase of 10% for the preventative and maintenance renewal budget, an increase of 2.24 million, and that, I could get the breakdown of that if you'd so choose. 24.6 for the base of post-secondary maintenance capital, 21.6 for base preventative maintenance and renewal capital, and 3 million for strategic projects. 4 million to support the capital design funding of the Saskatoon campus renewal project at Saskatchewan Polytech. 1.1 million for capital requirements at the U of R and Saskatchewan Polytechnic to support the nurse seat expansion. $1 million for planning and design work on the dental clinic at the University of Saskatchewan. 200,000 for Great Plains. They are looking to do an assessment of the auditorium renewal project. I think there's a fall off of a project that was done at Sask Poly, Moose Jaw. There's some renovations being done there, so there was fall off there of 6 million. And I think that covers it.
And then turning to AEO 3, there's under operational support decrease of about 2.5%. And can you just provide a bit more detail there?
You're talking about is the reduction of administrative savings, the provincial training allowance. We had, I guess, a small role in the intake of that program. That has been moved over to social services. So that is the 40,000.
Okay, thank you. And just moving down to the line on salaries, a $40,000 decrease, representing 2.7%. And can you give me a bit more detail on that?
So same answer, essentially. We're no longer administering the program. It's the salary dollars moving over to social services.
It's just the provincial training allowance salaries. That's what, yep, gotcha. Okay, and then the line on transfers to individuals. What does this all cover?
So that would be the student supports we give. There's a decrease this year. There was I guess, backing up a bit, in 17-18, SAGES was suspended. The payments, the $9 million or so payments, $9 million payments that went into that program. With this budget, we're winding down that program, and you'll see the $600,000 that we paid to the federal government to administer those funds so it's no longer represented here. So $600,000 decrease in those supports.
Okay, and so with the SAGE program, why is that being wound down?
So as I mentioned before, there was some difficult decisions we made a few years ago on this program in particular. It avoids $9 million or so annually that were paid by the government to those involved with the federal RESP program. And so, but we were still continuing to pay a $600,000 administration fee on top of that to the federal government to administer that program that was still, that was suspended. So, if we weren't going to reinstate that $9 million, I'd rather have that $600,000 go towards other areas of student need, and my tax is one of the results of that. Moving more towards a needs-based, we see in our student supports the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship, again, which was moved to needs-based a few years ago, and the Graduate Retention Program as well for those students to help them, deal with the cost of their post-secondary studies. Sorry. And so, as I mentioned in my opening, 75,000 students plus have taken advantage of that program. And so, again, on this program, it's again moving a little more towards needs-based on some of our programming. And again, decision was made several years ago, and $600K to not have to pay that fee going forward of cost avoidance. So.
Okay, thanks. And again, pardon my ignorance here, but with the SAGE program, you've noted that you're moving more to needs-based student support, and so am I correct in understanding that the SAGE program was not needs-based? Is that correct?
It was whoever paid into an RESP. So there's a federal component, and then the Saskatchewan would match 10% of your individual's contribution to that, up to $250 per year per child. And so it was a bit of a top-up on the federal program. We suspended in 17-18, and then winding it down this budget.
Thanks. I wanted to, I think, just now turn back to a few of the comments you made in your opening remarks. One was noting the 150 new nursing seats. And I'm curious to know how you arrived at this number, like why 150?
So I guess a bit of an explanation. We certainly work with all our partners on the government side, whether it's ICT, Ministry of Health, and of course the SHA. And ministry officials are always looking at that, working together on seeing what the right mix is, what the needs are out there, et cetera. And so we have to keep in mind, clinical placements, how many are we able to find in the system, the physical space to train, however many number you decide on, budget, all those things, the number of instructors we have available, that would factor into that, how many we can reasonably increase based on all those things I mentioned. So we work across government, and you'll know as well in different ministries. There's also recruitment and retention efforts also announced in this budget, not necessarily in this file, but sort of part of the big picture from government on that. So just a little note about some of the expansions that are taking place. So previous to the budget day, there were 690 registered nurses, 40 nurse practitioners, 40 registered psych nurses, registered psych nursing in 16 registered psych nursing in Northwest, and so 56 in total registered psych nursing. Anyway, the total was 786, and then after this expansion, on the RN side, 814, nurse practitioner 50, psych nurse 80, so a total of 944, increase total of 20%. On the RN side, 18% increase, nurse practitioner 25% increase, registered psych nurse 40% increase, and so there's the percentages, the numbers, in case just anticipating future questions. But again, we work together to try and find a number that works for the system.
Okay, thanks. And so, is this the number you were hearing from stakeholders? Like, I assume you engaged in consultations to arrive at this number of new seats that were needed, and is this the number that was reflected in the consultations that you undertook?
So yeah, I go back to my similar answer. As I said before, there's a certain amount of capacity that when you talk to all the stakeholders, that for the reasons I mentioned before, and you look at that capacity within the system, and that was a number that was reasonable, that they thought they could handle based on all those parameters I had mentioned before. And so that's the number we're at. We're doubling the number of seats available in our province since we more than doubling since we became government. So that's why we have this sort of this collaborative approach, and to make sure it's a reasonable number that people can work with. You don't just pick a number. You have to have something behind it. This was looked at closely. We're certainly, I would mention we're the ministry and all the partners, I guess I can speak, are always looking at different training needs. I think the example would be as I mentioned in my opening statement, the seats we purchase from other provinces, and that number has gone up in this budget. I believe it is as well in this vote, and so those are always being looked at with what the sector can handle and what also is needed. So.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to have a bunch of follow-up questions here. So as you know, the opposition has been calling for quite some time now for a health human resources strategy. And of course, as you mentioned, there's a promise in the budget for a new recruitment and retention agency for healthcare workers. And I'm sure, as we're all aware, there's been a significant struggle for many years in terms of recruitment and retention in healthcare generally, really across the board. And so specific to nurses, I'd like to know what is the graduate retention rate of nurses in Saskatchewan? Is this something that the ministry tracks?
Hi, I'm Kimberly Kratzig, the Deputy Minister of Advanced Education. A couple of points that I'll just flag in response to your question. First of all, one of the things that we keep a really close eye on is our graduation, our number of graduates each year, and we sort of track a 5-year average of graduates. So I'll share those numbers with you. So in licensed practical nursing, we are graduating on average 156 a year. Registered nursing, 554. Registered psychiatric nursing, 33, and nurse practitioners, 21. And so those numbers have sort of, that's about a 5-year average. In terms of retention, which is also another factor that's really important to consider, we have about a 93% retention rate in Saskatchewan in terms of people trained in Saskatchewan who stay in Saskatchewan. And we know anecdotally and from discussions with our institutions that are training our healthcare providers that, people who are trained closer to home are more likely to stay closer to home, and that's certainly a principle that is sort of in all of our nursing programs and health human resources generally.
Okay, thanks. So I guess this is somewhat related, but as you'll be aware, and as you're fully aware, there's the planned closure of the Regina campus nursing program based out of the U of S. And that's planned to close by 2024. So I am interested to know why the decision is being made to close that campus at a time where we have significant nursing shortages in our province. And I want to know, I guess as well, this is a part 2 question, what is the rationale for A, the planned closure, and B, the plan for seat redistribution that's been determined? Yeah, it was like a good thing no one was hurt. Yeah, it was, I didn't see exactly what, who was at fault or anything, but yeah.
So in what you're mentioning about things we've heard a fair amount about in the media, I just want to reinforce that this was a decision by the University of Saskatchewan, certainly not the ministry or the minister currently responsible for sure. So my understanding is those same amount of seats, same amount, as I mentioned before, number of nurses being trained in our province. Again, from what I understand, U of S made that decision. They think it'll allow more opportunities for rural and northern communities and learners to have an opportunity, and sort of this idea of learn where you live, and of course, as we all know, there's a need for rural recruitment of health professionals. So again, totally a U of S decision. They are an autonomous institution, and they make those decisions at their level. So there are, in terms of backfilling, that work is undergoing. There'll be 62 more seats at the U of R/SAS Poly program, and they'll work on that in the coming weeks and months here with their program. No firm decisions have been made on that, but we'll see how where those seats land exactly.
All right, yes, thanks, and I'm sorry if how I worded my question sounded like it was suggesting that was a decision by your ministry. I understand. I do have just a question around, so the 150 new nursing seats, what's the breakdown per institution then?
So in terms of the breakdown we're anticipating right now, on the U of R SAS Poly collaborative program, on the registered nursing side 62, on the nurse practitioner side 5, total 67. At the U of S program, registered nursing 62, nurse practitioner 5, total 67. And then the registered psychiatric nursing program delivered by SAS Poly only, 16.
Sorry, you said 60 for registered?
16.
16.
For a total of 150.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, again, sorry, it's a bit confusing because I thought in your opening remarks you said 150 new nursing seats and 60 new psych nursing seats. Did I misheard then? 16, and that was just under the total 150?
Yes.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can't remember what I said, but
I think I misheard. So I guess stemming from that, I'm aware, and just one second here, I'm just going to pull this up. But I'm aware that there was a proposal to the Government of Saskatchewan, Ministry of Advanced Ed, in September 2020 by the Registered Psychiatric Nursing Education Registered Psychiatric Nursing Association about education expansion in Saskatchewan. And my understanding is that they had proposed 120 additional seats. And so I now understand you're saying that 16 have been budgeted for. And so can you let me know, based on that, what I understand was a very extensive report, which the opposition also received, can you let me know how you arrived at the number of 16 seats as opposed to the 120 that were proposed?
So yeah, I appreciate the analysis from the RPNAS. I had several meetings with Ms. Belaski about their proposal, and so again that analysis. So, but we work with, as I mentioned before, we work with ICT, Health, SHA to determine our priorities in the system and what is possible to do. And so, we have to ensure there's clinical capacity. We have to ensure there's instructors. We have to ensure there is square footage, et cetera, to train our health complement. So, I would note, since we formed government, there's been a large increase in the number of registered psych nurses in our province, and it's been tough to recover. For a number of years in our province, we trained 0 psych nurses, and so that number has increased pre-budget from 56, and now we are funding 80, 24, as I mentioned in the 16 in the budget. Northwest is expanding by 8, and so for a total of 24 new. Total of 80 going forward. So that's a significant increase. Again, a 43% increase on the registered psych nurse. We realize how important this field is, and to go along with the increases we're seeing in the health side with the Ministry of mental health and addictions. But these are important, and again, those 8 at Northwest is specifically increase of 8 specifically for the SHNB. So anyway, there is a 43% increase, and again, we have to keep in mind to do a 1-year massive increase is it's very taxing on the system. So we have to keep that in mind and listen to our particular health partners in the SHA and work with them to find a number that can be done in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, thank you for the answer. So you talked a bit about issues with capacity, and you'd mentioned faculty and issues there with capacity. And so, as you're aware, not only do we have a nursing shortage, but we also have a shortage of nursing educators in our province. And so I'm wanting to know, what is your ministry's plan to deal not only with the shortage of nurses, but also the shortage of nurse educators that exists?
So in general, what I'd say on this is, we rely on the institutions to have a complement of faculty to ensure their programs are high quality and what is needed for them to deliver those programs. My understanding is U of S, for instance, I think you brought that up. They are they're working on recruiting. They haven't really indicated in the past, or when we're constantly talking to them and working with the institutions along with the healthcare providers, that there's an imminent issue. I'm not saying that they're in the health human resources right across Canada, if not North America, there is need for these particular folks. But I think that's goes back to the previous questions, to make sure we're growing at a pace that the system can accommodate. And so again, teaching those master's degree and the few that go into the PhD level, that is in the sort of the purview of the institutions on those higher levels of learning that are required to be able to teach the courses.
Okay. Moving on a bit, but still talking about recruitment and retention and this new agency that's been announced. What role will the Ministry of Advanced Education be playing in relation to the new agency?
Hi, the Ministry of Health is still working on some of those details around what that new agency will look like. So, we don't have all of the details right now, but the Ministry of Advanced Education will be represented at that table and will certainly be able to bring the training perspective and help inform all of those discussions and ensure that the training needs of the province are well understood among other partners that will be at that table. But the details are still being sorted out.
Thanks. And bouncing back then specifically to nurses and, potential, I guess, incentives around recruitment and retention. It actually was recently brought to my attention that nurses during their preceptorship are unpaid, completely unpaid. This is, I think, of concern, and I think something that certainly could provide an effective recruitment and retention piece for nursing. And so this is something that has been brought to my attention by stakeholders as a major concern. There's also the aspect of, it being obviously a female-dominated profession, nursing. And, you look at paid versus unpaid sort of internships across other sectors like the trades or like with physicians, and you don't see that same issue. And so I certainly am being advised that it's perceived also as that factored in, is that it's, again, the chronic undervaluation of women's work in our society. And so I wonder if that is something that you've given some consideration to in terms of paid preceptorships, and if that's one tool that you might be open to exploring in terms of recruitment and retention initiatives for nurses.
So I guess in terms of support for nursing or any healthcare profession, that would be sort of, I would say the recruitment and retention side would be more Ministry of Health or the SHA, and you know, they have bursaries and scholarships they have on the retention side. From our side, we mentioned for a graduate retention program helps defer those costs of post-secondary. Also note on the student supports available for our nurses that choose to work in rural locations. There's an ability to receive student loan relief up to $20,000 for a 5-year commitment to be in a designated location in rural Saskatchewan. So probably not our question to answer on the SHA health side if there's ever been thought of paying those training to become a nurse or whatever it may be, lab tech, whatever field you choose. Generally, that's part of the training of those fields. But fair enough.
Okay, so I have a number of more health-related questions. I'm probably gonna maybe skip over to some other things just so I don't run out of time. But one I'll just maybe end with on the health front, just for now at least, is I'd asked about the graduate retention rate for nurses and wondering as well about the graduate retention rate for doctors in Saskatchewan, and if that's again something that you track and what that's looking like.
We don't have that. We as a ministry don't have numbers on that. I will note we certainly spend a lot of money for the College of Medicine, and part of that is the increase from 40 to 100 seats, and from 60 to 120 in I believe it's postgraduate. So we don't know how many we keep after X amount of years from our ministry side anyway.
Okay, thanks. And are you aware if that's tracked by any other ministries?
I think we have to check with the College of Medicine if they do track that, and after how many years would they track and keep track of that. But we don't have that here with us tonight.
Okay, thanks. And are you amenable to finding that information through your ministry and reporting back? And I'm requesting to table.
We could try and track it down, either through the ministry or the college, or if they do any surveys of longer term retention.
And when would be a reasonable date that I could follow up with the ministry on that?
Could 2 weeks, all right. A couple weeks, I think, might be a reasonable time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Minister. And then I think I'm going to move on from health, at least for now, and talk a little bit, ask some questions around support generally for post-secondary institutions, including operating grants, and a bit of follow-up on the multi-year funding agreement with the institutions. So I know we talked about this last time around, but I am wondering, with the sector-wide multi-year funding agreement, in one respect, it was certainly positive to see the stable, predictable funding for the institutions over 4 years. And again, I recognize that was something that was a longstanding wish and request from the institutions. However, the funding in terms of operating grants clearly continues to be insufficient, with the agreement freezing base operating grant funding at the 2020 to 2021 levels until 2024, So this 0% increase actually reflects a negative funding amount with collective bargaining agreement salary grid movements. And institutions are also concerned about the significant cost increases in inflationary pressures to the tune of 5 to 7%, which will have to be absorbed by the institutions as the economy reopens. I want to note, too, that the deficits we're seeing coming out of the province's two largest institutions, our universities, for example, are of particular concern. The University of Regina's latest budget projections indicate a $16 million shortfall for the 21 to 22 fiscal year. As well, a statement released in February 2022 from the U of R indicated that the university is looking at all avenues of generating revenue and reducing costs to develop a balanced budget in 22-23. And then with the University of Saskatchewan, they have indicated they're anticipating a $21 million shortfall per year, and consulting firm Cubane Uniform has been brought in to identify efficiencies at that institution. I've also been advised that cuts are on the horizon over the next 3 years at the U of S, and I'm told that some of these cuts they've been described as wrenching to me. And so the question is, as the Minister of Advanced Education, how do you feel that providing 0% increases will allow the institutions to remain financially viable?
right, so a couple of things I'd say to that. I would disagree with the concept that it is a 0% increase. $60 million up front over 4 years with stable base funding, 5% each in year 1 and 2. And so it's, this allocation is very much appreciated by the sector. I think U of S has stated to me they are certainly the envy of the universities across Canada. So again, the multi-year funding, the idea of the upfront funding is to drive those sustainability measures going into the future. This was an agreement negotiated with the sector to emphasize the partnership we have with the sector. And so the institutions are using that money to generate revenue, reduce expenses, to deal with the long-term sustainability of this sector. So I would note here the information I have in terms of the percentage of provincial funding for institutions across Canada. At the U of S, it's 59% of all their revenue comes from government. Much higher. There's several institutions that I could just pick them out here. The ones we've heard of, University of Toronto, 25% of their revenue comes from government. UBC, 39%. And down the list we go. We compare very favorably. At the U of R, 47% of their total revenue comes from the provincial operating grant, much higher than York University, for example, which is at 29%. Brock University, which the U of S beat in their first round game at the national championship, is at 31%. And so I think we stack up fairly favorably in terms of the amount of their total funding that comes from the province of Saskatchewan.
Okay, thanks. And I may have missed a one or two there, but are you, I understand these are all Ontario-based institutions. Is that?
I just picked one.
Totally.
I could go down the entire list if you like.
No, I wouldn't like that. Thank you.
I just picked them kind of out of thin air, ones
Yeah.
that look good to me. So.
Okay, great. And so in the scheme of things, nationwide, where would we fall in Saskatchewan in terms of how, what percentage is funded by the province? Where do we actually fall?
So I think in the U15, as I mentioned, I'm talking about all the universities, in the U15, the top 15 research universities. We are only below Quebec-based universities, and I think we probably have a decent idea of where they get their funding from. So we're at 59%. Memorial is in Newfoundland. So I'm sorry. There's three. Memorial University is the highest at 76%. There's three more in Quebec, and then the University of Saskatchewan. So I guess we're fifth highest. Same for the University of Regina. The top three are Quebec-based. The highest is 72% of their funding. Total funding pool comes from government grants, operating grants. University of Montreal is at 72%, Concordia 53%, University of Victoria 52%, U of R 47%, so we're fifth there as well. Fifth out of 15.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for breaking that down for me. And noted your comment on Quebec and where that funding comes from. I assume you're referring to taxes, but That leads actually quite nicely into my next sort of phase of questioning here. A few things I was hoping to get clear on. I did note on page 67 of the budget that the total amount allocated for the graduate retention program in 22-23 is $65 million. Additionally, the total dollar amount committed to student supports in this year's estimates is sitting at $39.2 million. So I just wanted to double check that I've got this right. So like the total amount that the government is committing to in terms of overall student supports in this budget, including the GRP, is $104.2 million. Is that correct? Is there anything I'm missing there?
So the number we have here is 102,620,000 broken down by, as you mentioned, 65 million for GRP, 27 million appropriation of the student aid fund, scholarships, Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship, 7.125 million, Innovation Opportunity Scholarship, 3 million, and other scholarships, I think I mentioned in my opening remarks, that would be Queen Elizabeth Scholarship, Scholarship of Honor, French language, and so those three scholarships, those three amounts equal 10,620,000. So again, that totals 102.6 million.
Okay, sorry, I don't know where my math went wrong there. I'm a bit tired. So anyway, we're in the ballpark. There's something I'm really curious in finding out, and hopefully you're able to provide the information. It's something that's come to my attention recently. I've been advised that the total amount the ministry allocates on an annual basis for all student supports, including the graduate retention program, is approximately equivalent to the cost of providing free tuition to all domestic students in Saskatchewan for a 4-year BA. And I really would love to know if that's accurate. And if it's not possible to confirm that at this time, I again would ask that the answer be tabled.
So we don't have that exact figure, and I'm not sure if you're bringing that forward or you're saying that's what should be done. You know, I would think if you just focus on BAs, then, well, we talked extensively about nursing. What about nursing? What about doctors? What about all the areas, the fields that we certainly need as well? You know, I think when you look at it, if you qualify for student loans, lower income students, and again, we talked earlier about needs-based assessment and that sort of thing, where we should concentrate some of our student supports to. Lower income students qualify for up to $700-800 in grants on the federal. The provincial side, as I mentioned before, the Saskatchewan student grant and the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship. Those grants cover your tuition. They cover your tuition if you're here in Saskatchewan for that BA program. And so combine that with, again, we talked about the graduate retention program. So if you're a student who has the opportunity to live at home, you know, at the end of the day, you have a lot of your student experience covered already by the various programs that we have. So I think in general, it's reasonable for students to pay for some of the cost of their experience or their degree. They, in general, I've seen and read things, studies that those who graduate from post-secondary certainly have an advantage in the rest of their careers in terms of earning power, and it can be quite extensive, and so that's another piece of this as well. So, you know, again, if you're a lower income student, I think it's pretty close. It's reasonable to say you don't pay a lot of tuition, depending on what program you're in, of course, but just to. I don't know if you're doing it for a comparison's sake or for instance, but if that's what's you know, you're putting forward and think that should happen, you know, there's some arguments against that. So.
Okay, thanks for your answer. And so is your ministry committed to looking at those numbers and making that comparison and getting back to me on that?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think we know the exact number of arts students currently here in Sask. You know, and I think we have a good idea of what tuition costs, but we don't have the. But it'd be straight up multiplier calculation.
Right, but you would have access to enrollment rates, even just as an example, through the institutions, right?
Again, I don't think we have the exact numbers in our, you know, in U of S, U of R, and then our regionals. If there's programs brokered that, I don't think we have the exact total number and the tuition charge. But again, we can get that for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep.
I think, at least it's been suggested to me, if you're looking at essentially the overall average tuition would be what you're looking at, and then also looking at the enrollment rates as a total, and then on that basis you could sort of make the calculations. Yeah. And do you know when might be reasonable to expect that we could hear back on that?
We may be able to find an estimated number by the end of the night. The exact number, again, within a couple weeks, I think is reasonable.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And I guess, you know, I'll just say, and we'll see if it's able to be calculated by the end of tonight, but if it is the case that this is accurate, would your ministry consider dispensing with the current hodgepodge of student supports that exists and consider bringing in universal tuition for Saskatchewan students, at least at a starting point? And I'm talking just in terms of this example that we've discussed here. I mean, if the cost is truly equivalent to providing all domestic students with the cost of tuition for a 4-year BA, for example, would your ministry be amenable to considering changing the way things are done in terms of student supports in that manner? If anyone else does, I am certainly open to that. I'm good, but if someone else needs a break.
Stand on at the end anyway, so I'm good to just keep going. That's all good. The other one's working. Good job, Jennifer. So no break. Just give me 15 minutes. I can sit with that for a little while. We can also. So run up break, right? Not me, my parents. My parents. They must have been working the system. So, I don't know, because I think, was it 3 of them, or was it 100? Maybe it was 100. Sure. I have to check it, but it was dope. And so every month it's blind, and then Darcy's like, when the check was. Smart kids.
So I guess some initial numbers that we came up with, and I think you had moved away from in your question, just the BA undergrad to total undergrad, roughly 35,000 credentialed undergrad in the province. 8,500, let's say, average tuition. That's about $300 million. So that's a significant amount over the current student supports. Again, I think I'd go back to, well, I guess several things. I think, again, I think it's reasonable for some students, and keep in mind, only half of the students in our institutions need some sort of aid. The rest, they're able to handle themselves, whether through their parents or what have you. So half the students don't need any sort of financial help, as it appears from our perspective anyway. You know, on the universal tuition thing, we've gone towards more of a needs-based system. You could hypothetically say, if as our institutions are autonomous, you know, if we gave them $300 million, you know, that's not necessarily. Suppose we could have agreements on the side on that, but again, they're autonomous, and you know that operating funding doesn't necessarily have to go to tuition. That's a small thing, and again, agreements can be made on that. I'd point out that significant amount of the student aid fund is federal funding. We'd lose that funding coming into the province. It's interesting to note. That I talked about some of the programs out there, particularly in the province of Quebec, that have very little or no tuition, and maybe I think I could be wrong on this, but some of their CEGEP programs, there's no higher student uptake. So from that lesson, at least it doesn't appear that low or no tuition equals all sorts of other people accessing the system. So again, I think you know, I'd say that it's not something we're looking at right now. I think the system is reasonable, and we have reasonable supports for those low-income students here in the province, and you combine that with some of the back-end supports, graduate retention program, if you're a nurse or a vet, loan forgiveness program, you know, there could be a substantial part of your tuition covered.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the initial estimates. Still would really like to see kind of hard numbers if you're able to produce them within a couple weeks. I think it's well worth the wait. And yeah, I look forward to receiving that information. I guess just a couple of comments. We maybe just fundamentally disagree on sort of the merits of universal tuition, or, you know, whether needs-based funding is appropriate for post-secondary, especially for something like a BA level credential. And I guess, you know, from not just my perspective, but certainly the students I speak to, and I guess in my riding, like the U of S is in my riding, so I speak to students on a continual basis, not just there, but across the province. And I hear consistently about affordability issues for obtaining a post-secondary education in Saskatchewan. And that's something that is consistently the #1 concern I hear from people in my riding, from stakeholders with advanced education. And so you've talked a bit about back-end supports like the graduate retention program, but unfortunately what I hear from students most often is the difficulties and the barriers experienced with the front end of funding their education. And so what I hear very often is that many prospective students, you know, folks that don't even end up being students, are simply prevented from even entering into a post-secondary education because of the upfront costs associated with it. And then, you know, in addition to that, the incredible debt loads that students are carrying through funding a post-secondary education. You know, I don't want to give my age away here, but, you know, even when I was attending university, like, and not to get too sort of anecdotal here, but, you know, I came from a very low income family. And so, you know, I did receive some money in terms, certainly I received student loans and I received some money in terms of scholarships and awards, bursaries, but I still came out of that from a very, very low income family with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And so, when you're talking about needs-based funding, and not to say that obviously the ministry isn't providing some supports, of course that you are, but it's simply not sufficient for a lot of students who, if they're able to fund that on the front end, are coming out with tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And I mean, we're not talking about dentistry here. We're talking about a basic, if we're talking university, a basic bachelor's. So I guess, this is why I would ask, that you give some consideration and keep some, of an open mind towards this, because there are a lot of barriers in place for prospective students and for, students who do end up, being able to, like, in theory, fund their education, but then end up being saddled with enormous levels of debt. And so I would ask you to reconsider and to take a look at, if those numbers approximately line up, whether that may be a better model here. And I know it's a bit more nuanced than that, and I know perhaps that may only sort of apply for an entry-level credential. But, you look at how the job market, the labor market has changed over the last number of decades. And whereas high school education used to cut it and, workers used to be able to enter the workforce, get a well-paying job, buy a house, have a couple kids, maybe, everyone would have a car, right? Like, it's just, that's not the case anymore. So, the prospects for someone now graduating high school and entering the workforce with a high school education are, in many cases, pretty bleak in terms of their potential for earnings. And so it's more or less a requirement at this, at this stage of the game to hold some form of credential beyond high school in order to be able to earn what would be, considered a living income in Saskatchewan. And so I guess to me that would be the fundamental argument, is to take another look at that, because we do fund primary and secondary education universally in this province. And because of those changes over the last number of decades, I think that it warrants a second look at, whether universal tuition, at least to some degree, for post-secondary education is something that, the people of this province should be able to expect. So a bit of a tirade, apologies, but it was nice to have the discussion with you, Minister. And so I'll look forward to hearing back. I'm just going to skip around here, I think, a little bit. I wanted to talk a bit about the situation here for international students, and I'm sure this will come as no surprise to you. As you know, we've been presenting a petition in the House on calling for a freeze for international tuition rates. And that came from stakeholders. That came directly from students. This isn't something that I cooked up in my office. It was very much coming and continues to come from the students, the international students in this province, who we've seen mobilizing increasingly in recent months. And certainly, I would say, since the signing of the multi-year funding agreement last year, which, as you recall from our discussion last year, excludes tuition caps for international students in Saskatchewan. And so that was very much noted by international students in Saskatchewan. And we've seen increasing numbers of rallies and town halls and organizing happening on campuses. And so I know that we've had somewhat this discussion before, but I don't think last year we got fully into a consideration of and the question of what the ministry's rationale was for excluding international students from the tuition caps that are entailed in the MOU for multi-year funding. Well, sorry, second part, like, will this be reconsidered by the ministry? Because, you know, I'm sure that you've been seeing the rallies too, and what's been happening, particularly at a U of R right here in Regina. They've had a lot of action on that front and have been getting very organized. And so just a two-part question there.
So just on some of the comments you had made, I would say we do see growing enrollment in our post-secondary sector. I think that shows people show the value of it. It still is accessible, and I think there's a strong suite of student financial supports. The multi-year tuition or multi-year funding, you referenced before, holds tuition at 4% for domestic, and So again, there's a student loan side, repayment assistance program. I haven't talked about that. That's an important plan if students get into, graduates get into issues with repaying those student loans. So overall, I think it's reasonably affordable. And again, the good incomes we hope to see past graduation. I urge students to. All the students I talk to also take a look at the trades as well. It doesn't have to be a 4-year, a 6-year, an 8-year degree. A lot of the trades, you can learn for very little, and you can work while you learn as well. That's the way those are set up. So universal's not the norm in Canada. I would point also that. That's, the private scholarships that are out there as well. There's all kinds of them. And you had mentioned that was in your experience and a little bit in mine as well. So anyway, in terms of the international, of course, institutions, as part of their autonomy, they are responsible for setting the tuition and fees for students. They want to be able to set fees that allow the cost of delivering that programming and to make sure they're quality. You mentioned tuition rates for international undergrad students. They are higher than domestic students, yes, but compared to right across Canada, they're among the lowest in Canada. They've increased by 15.8% over the last 5 years compared to the national average of 31.6%. International students in Saskatchewan pay on average $22,197. The national average is $33,623. That's the average. Graduate retention program also applies to those folks who want to stay here in Saskatchewan, earn a living, and hopefully raise a family and stay right here in Saskatchewan. And I would also note the cost of living in Saskatchewan compared to University of Toronto, UBC, whatever it may be, is substantially lower than here in Saskatchewan than those places. For instance, if not right across the country in terms of rent and those sorts of costs. So I recognize the concern, but certainly when you look at what it's compared to, there's an advantage, and also having great, wonderful institutions that are welcoming, have a variety of subject areas to look at. The help for international on the Innovation and Opportunity Scholarship, as well as the MyTax program as well, it can help defray some of those costs. I will note that the U.S., for example, again, the international is market-based, so the institutions themselves have to look and keep that in mind. But so this fall, USask International PhD students will now pay the domestic rate. So there's that as well. So they want to, as part of that market, they want to make sure they're attracting top international PhD students to Saskatchewan. So that's something they're offering this fall.
Thanks for that. So I want to, you also mentioned the graduate retention program applies to international students, and I wanted to talk a bit about retention rates. Pardon?
Sorry. International, domestic, any student
Yes.
that's
Right.
that's
Okay, so my understanding is that excluding the Maritime, Saskatchewan has the lowest rates of graduate retention after both 1 year of graduation and after 5 years of graduation. And that's not just for international, but both domestic and international. So I'd like you to, if you could, talk about how you feel. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier on about how many people have accessed the graduate retention program. But is that program, I mean, it would appear by these numbers that program isn't overly effective. And unless I'm missing something, and unless the numbers I've got here are incorrect, I wonder if you could speak to that. And, if there's a consideration and if those numbers are correct, if, you would be considering a reevaluation of that program and the utility of it.
So just in terms of the graduate retention program, there's been some numbers over time since '08. I mentioned the amount of people that taking it. Certainly, I think it's part of the mix when people decide what to do after graduation, where to go, and there's a number of factors, of course. I think the biggest being would be jobs, and that side of things, Saskatchewan's a place for you. Come on over. The unemployment rate is very low, among the lowest in the country. It has been for the last decade. 30,000 new jobs in the last year. Cost of living is reasonable, as I mentioned before. Low taxes, and just the amount of private sector jobs that they're forecasting or that have been announced and are forecasted as a result of those announcements, I think is a very good reason to be here in Saskatchewan, stay here in Saskatchewan. Aided by the graduate retention program, I think is part of the mix, and certainly out of province students total that got that certificate 28,575. My understanding is the program's reported to have influenced roughly 4 in 10 graduates' decision to stay in the province after they completed their program. That's some of it. Again, there's several things. I will note graduate mobility. 2 years after the graduation, 9 in 10 respondents who were living in Saskatchewan and they graduated were still living in Saskatchewan. That's the most recent survey completed in 2016. So there's a lot going for Saskatchewan. That affordability piece for those that stay and who took some sort of post-secondary degree is aided by that GRP, and it's part of the mix for those young people. When you start out here, sometimes it's easier to stay. I think of my generation. A lot of folks moved west in my day. My brother still lives there. He went there for a job and met someone, and at that young age, once you're there, it's sometimes you stay there. So this is one part of the toolbox to have people stay here, but it's part of that. Part of the piece, but strong economy with lots of jobs available, which what we have in Saskatchewan, is also part of the mix.
Okay, thanks for the answer. I guess, I would hope that, as with any government program offered, there would be sort of an ongoing evaluation of the efficacy of the program, and if that's money well spent by, using taxpayer dollars, essentially. And so, I didn't hear you correcting my numbers about us being the lowest, excluding the Maritimes, in terms of rates of graduate retention. So if this program is not serving its intended purpose, then why would the government be continuing with this program? And instead of, using a program like the GRP that is assisting with back-end costs of a post-secondary education, why would you not instead consider shifting that to front-end supports? Since, as I said, the numbers just clearly indicate that that's not having the intended effect.
I should ask that. I don't think we have those numbers. I'm not sure where those were coming from. Okay.
From 2021.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we certainly always look at grow government programs, try and find what's expected, because you're right, it's taxpayers' dollars. If you did some sort of universal program at the front end, I don't think there's a guarantee either of students staying here in Saskatchewan, right? You might have more people come in Saskatchewan, take their free degree, and then moving on as well. So I don't think that would necessarily solve that issue.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the response. And I guess, my point here is that if you've got a program that is not serving its intended purpose and it in fact, does not really help in reducing barriers to obtaining a post-secondary education, at least on the front end, then, and I'm not gonna make this into a question. I guess I'll just say, for your consideration, I would hope that the ministry would look at adjusting course there, and looking at more front-end programs to aid with affordability for post-secondary students. So from there, I am going to talk a bit more and have a few more questions about affordability of post-secondary education and even just talking about undergrad fees. I know you talked about the trades, which are great too, but certainly when I'm looking at undergraduate tuition fees in Saskatchewan as a whole, again, according to Statistics Canada, we're looking at, first of all, just in 21 to 22, undergraduate tuition fees increasing by 5.6%, and that representing the third highest increase of tuition in that year, in 21 to 22, only behind Alberta and Quebec. And so, in addition to that, if you're taking a look at the scene here for the cost of a post-secondary education over the longer term, if you're looking at 10 years, again, according to Statistics Canada, you're seeing that undergraduate fees for Saskatchewan students have increased by 43.6% over the past 10 years. And you're also seeing that undergraduate fees for international students in Saskatchewan have increased by 50% in the last 10 years. And so, I heard what you're saying about sort of where we fall in the scheme of things, U15 or otherwise, but I guess what I'm wanting to know is, how that is viewed as an affordable and accessible education. And I guess, again, this is part of the argument for universal tuition is, you're talking about how this is relatively affordable. That's not affordable. In no circumstance could anyone reasonably argue that it's affordable in the past 10 years to have those kind of increases to an undergraduate education in our province. And I just want to move on, a bit more on that front, and just sort of bear with me. I'm flipping back and forth here. So in terms of affordability, I think that, yes, you did mention that, the institutions, certainly the universities, are autonomous, but of course we've seen with this multi-year funding agreement that there is an agreement made that the province participated in that includes tuition setting measures. So yes, I agree they're autonomous, but they willingly signed, onto this agreement in order to secure multi-year funding. And so that 4% number, like you talked about that before, at least in terms of domestic students, but and I'm sure you know this, but just to clarify for our viewers at home, the many of which I'm sure there are, 4%, that applies to institution-wide. That's my understanding, institution-wide increases. So my understanding is that there actually there is no cap per se, I guess, in the MOU on, per program sort of increases. And so I think that, well, it's just a bit misleading to say, 4% caps. And I don't mean to say you're trying to be misleading, but it's not quite that simple. So I wanted to ask to, related to that, have there been any exclusions that have been requested since we met last year relating to that MOU? I know that, that's stipulated that there can be exclusions.
So as it, just to quickly go over the MOU, and I think you referenced some of this, but it states to a maximum, I'll back up. The parties agree that for the protection of students, the senior administration of the institution will annually recommend its approving body that the institution will generally limit domestic tuition increase for credential programs to a maximum 4% institution-wide average in each academic year with exemptions, which will be confirmed annually. Tuition for international students, as you mentioned. Domestic tuition that falls below the peer comparator median. And any other exemptions confirmed by the parties. And so, again, the exemptions, international students, U of S engineering and computer science are below their comparator medians by 10.2 and 8.9% respectively. Grad studies are below the peer comparator. Dental assisting certificate increased by 13.4%. Western College of Vet Med, the U of S is also an exemption due to the interprovincial funding agreement. We'll see a tuition increase of 5% and 0.9 for non-provincial agreement students. Johnson Soriano Graduate School of Public Policy, an increase of 21.6 as it's far below the peer comparator. And I believe those, are they all at the U of S? I think as I see, those are at the U of S.
Okay, and so,
Sorry, not quite finished. Just in terms of comparing, again, we're comparing across other universities. Tuition revenue as a percentage of total operating revenue at the U of S, it's 27%. That's sort of roughly in the middle of the pack, but in the top half of the least amount that that relies on student tuition. And then U of R, 41%, and I think they're again in the top half of comparator institutions. So kind of the reverse of the situation we talked about earlier in terms of provincial funding. So.
and so, just so I'm clear, two-part question here is, so the, I think I said exclusions before, I meant exemptions are only limited to the U of S? Those are the only exemptions that have been agreed to since last year?
The only one we see for U of R is Johnson Soriano. That's a joint delivered program, and so that's the only one that we see. But no, it's not just for U of S. It just happens to be for U of S. I will note that U of R for the fall semester hasn't come out with their tuition schedule yet.
Okay, thanks. And I just, you had mentioned some of the specific increases, and I either didn't hear or I don't think was mentioned for some of these, like, for instance, the engineering and computer science. If you could just very quickly go through what the increases are for each of those.
Sorry, just to double check, you're asking for the programs I mentioned, the percent increase.
Yeah.
So that's not it.
U of S engineering, 10.2%. Computer science, 8.9. Again, below their comparator average of other institutions. Dental assisting certificate, 13.4. WCVM, VetMed, 5%. For interprovincial agreement seats. And Johnson Cerama, 21.6.
Okay, thanks.
Like he just read all those numbers, so what is that? Is that the percentage?
So there are the exemptions from the international.
With the next question. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah, for sure. And we can, I don't mind if you want to jump back to it if it changes, but, so I'm wondering then, like, really, what are the restrictions on exemptions for the MOU? Like, what restrictions exist? Because, I mean, we're seeing here, just in the first year alone, like, multiple exemptions have been granted.
So again, as to the agreement in the MOU, if they're at the market, they're staying under that 4%. If they're significantly under the market, they're bringing the cost of those programs up. Overall, my understanding at the U of S, I think you mentioned right at the beginning, across the whole board is 3.7%. So some are above that, some below. We mentioned the ones that have gone up a rather large amount. Again, they've fallen significantly under the market.
Okay, thanks. I am running very short on time, so I'm gonna just, I do have at least one more question I was hoping to ask today, and then perhaps some that I can submit in writing afterwards. But I'd like to know if there have been noticeable changes to enrollment, overall enrollment at institutions over the last year, both for domestic and international. And I would ask too, if the answers to these questions are not immediately available, I'd also ask that those be tabled.
Hi there. I thought that I might, one of the things we were going to get back to you on was the retention of Saskatchewan College of Medicine students. We do have information from the College of Medicine annual report in terms of retention of U of S residents. So I can tell you that for all programs in 2020, 2021, there was a 63% retention rate. For Royal College programs, there was a 57% retention rate, and for family medicine programs, it was 69%. And that is those who have remained and practiced in Saskatchewan based on their type of program. So that's from the College of Medicine annual report. I just wanted to get that into the record because that was one of the follow-ups we had for you. Thank you.
Two enrollments. So in 2021 academic year, there's 53,410 students. This is down slightly from the year previous when there was 53,820 in 1920, year 2019-2020. So year over year, 1% decrease, but over the past 5 years, there was a 7% increase in all credential programs. I think that answers your question.
Okay, thanks. And I think I'll, I do have, as you can imagine, additional questions. We never quite get to all of them, but as I said, I can submit the other ones that you haven't heard yet tonight in writing. And then I believe it really is just the one remaining about those calculations around, potential universal tuition. And yeah, it would be great to receive that in the next few weeks. I'll follow up if I don't hear from you. And I understand the Easter break is in between there too. So I'll give you that week as a freebie. But yeah, I want to say thanks very much for answering questions. I don't know if it's customary for the minister to give closing remarks first, but I'll turn the floor over if that's the case.
It's really up to you. You can go ahead with your remarks, and then
Okay.
I'll ask the minister to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Minister, I really appreciate your time. It was good to see you again this year, and thanks for going through all these questions. I know it's a bit exhausting having 3 hours in a row, and thanks a lot to your officials. I know, well, I've at least heard how much time goes into preparing for these estimates. Many people committed to the work over, as I understand it, a number of months, and really appreciate all the good work and prep that goes into this. And again, apologies that I'm still a bit new to this all, and still learning as I go, and learning a lot from the information that you've provided to me here tonight. So thanks so much for that, and look forward to Bill 61 coming up next.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowes. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours for concluding remarks.
Yeah, you bet. Some of the similar remarks. I'd like to thank the committee. I know you were here for several hours before this this set of estimates, and thank those members for their questions and the dialogue, the respectful dialogue that took place here this evening. Officials, they're so important to the people of the province of Saskatchewan, all the work they do behind the scenes. And you're right, there's a incredible amount of work that goes into not only this, but ongoing work that we find ourselves doing throughout the year. And so they're very dedicated, and very lucky to have them to work alongside. And we appreciate it so much, and we will get back to you with those outstanding items in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Having reached our agreed upon time for consideration of these estimates, we will adjourn consideration of the estimates and the lending and investing activities estimates for the Ministry of Advanced Education. Thank you. We'll take a short break and resume consideration of Bill number 61 in a few short minutes. officials to introduce? Oh, we're not on yet? Okay. We're good to go now? Yep, you bet. You're good to go? All right. We will now begin consideration of Bill number 61, the Post-Secondary Education Skills Training Act 2021, Clause 1, short title. Ms. Bose, do you have any questions?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I would have a few different officials that I'd like to introduce. Yes. Joining us, other officials here were here for estimates. Clint Repsky is the Deputy Minister for Immigration and Career Training. Darcy Smishnik is the ADM in ICT as well. Lindell was here earlier. Mike Pestle was here. Jill Zupa, Director Strategic and Legislative Priorities Unit, Ministry of Advanced Education. And I have some opening comments about Bill 61, if now is the time. Okay, thank you. So last fall, the opportunity to introduce Bill 61, the Post-Secondary Education Skills Training Act 2021. And we're here to consider the bill in more detail. And to begin, I'd like to provide some context on what brought us to the development of this bill. So for the past 6 years, the ministry has been working together with post-secondary education institutions to enhance accountability and better demonstrate how institutions are using government's investment to support students, communities, and the economy. What began with the introduction of 5 expectations for our sector in 2016 has led to enhanced data collection and reporting, and the province's first multi-year funding commitment for post-secondary education launched with last year's budget. We work together with 16 institutions to build a shared accountability approach that better demonstrates the impact of government's investment in the post-secondary sector. The multi-year funding MOU, which was signed by all Saskatchewan post-secondary institutions that receive public funding, provides consistent funding to the sector over a 4-year period, as we've outlined earlier, and outlines enhanced accountability requirements to ensure the ministry is better able to report on how each institution has uniquely targeted this investment to promote long-term financial sustainability. Reforms to our legislative framework serve as an anchor to support these ongoing accountability efforts. Ministry officials consulted with post-secondary education institutions on each of these accountability initiatives, and Bill 61 was developed with their input and collaboration. One overall objective of 61 is to clearly articulate the minister's roles, responsibilities, and obligations within the post-secondary education system. Within the current act, the minister's authority was very broad, and Bill 61 adds additional details to better articulate what the minister must do and what the minister may do to fill the assigned mandate. The power section does not provide any additional ministerial oversight than what currently exists. It either maintains or provides greater specificity than what is in the existing act. While the proposed new act better articulates the minister's role to ensure oversight for the entire sector, the changes will not interfere with the crucial role of boards of governors to oversee their institutions. The new act also complements existing post-secondary education legislation that articulates the powers and responsibilities of institutions and their boards to manage their operations. A second objective of the bill is to apply oversight and accountability practices to all institutions that receive government funding. Prior to this bill, legislated accountability requirements were inconsistent between institutions, and in some cases did not exist for institutions that do not have public acts. Bill 61 aims to create a more consistent level of oversight and accountability across a diverse set of post-secondary education and skills training institutions that receive public dollars. The bill also reflects efforts to improve data collection and reporting and align with the expectations outlined in the government's multi-year funding MOU. So, Mr. Chair, in closing, I'd like to emphasize the updated legislation better supports Saskatchewan's critical investment in the post-secondary education sector, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ms. Bose, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for your remarks, Minister. I understand that, throughout adjourned debate, you've heard the opposition's thoughts around this bill, and not thoughts that again, are intended to be ideological or political in nature, but perspectives that have been shaped by numerous stakeholders who I, as the critic, have been consulting with, and who some of my other colleagues have heard from as well in the course of their work as members of the Assembly. And so I would like to get into, I know we have limited time here, so I'd like to just ask some general questions about a few specific aspects of the bill. The first I'll start with is specifically what accountability measures will be implemented, and second part, what specific criteria are included in the performance framework?
I'll just remind you, we have a loose agreement to go till 10 o'clock. So I know Ms. Bose has a number of questions, so if we could keep our answers tight and succinct, that would be helpful.
So some general comments, and then I'll maybe get Lindell some follow-ups to do with that. So again, I think I mentioned my opening comments there. This stems from auditor recommendations, and so our efforts to enhance accountability in the post-secondary sector follow the two recommendations from the auditor: establish measurable targets to enable monitoring of the achievement of our strategies, ours, the ministry, analyze gaps in achieving our strategies, and use the analysis when determining how to best engage post-secondary institutions to contribute to the ministry's strategies. So to address those recommendations, we've been working to more clearly articulate ministry goals and expectations, better understand how the sector is aligning with those goals and expectations, ensure we have the right information and data to measure the sector's success. So again, the bill reflects 7 years of collaborative work with the sector. Extensive consultation and feedback was taken to demonstrate the incredible value of our public investment in Saskatchewan's post-secondary and training sector. So this performance was is done before this bill. I'd like to point that out as well. So in terms of the accountability measures in Clause 4, it's a term used in the bill to refer to any measures that may be used to help government understand the impact of our grants or funding provided to the institution. So again, I think a great example is the multi-year funding agreement we had with the sector, and you know, what we want to see from that investment in terms of long-term sustainability. And you know, those reports are required from those institutions twice yearly on what they're up to with those funds, and we want to work together with those institutions to drive that sustainability. And the 5 sort of overarching areas that we came up, or the ministry came up with, as a result of the auditor's intervention: accessible, responsive, accountable, sustainable, and high quality. And so that's sort of the criteria, overarching criteria we want to see from the sector. Again, this is work that has already been undertaken. We just, with this legislation, we want to make sure that it's clear to the sector, and that the sector is on board with this to demonstrate the good work being done, and the expenditures. Institutions, I think, realize that that they are a public institution, and they want to you know, prove to the public that you know, they are doing great things that they are. So with that, Mr. Veach, if you had any other comments that would help with the answer.
Thanks, Minister. Lindell Veach, Executive Director. As the Minister said, our accountability journey has been going on for a number of years. In 2015, the auditor asked the ministry to be more diligent about making sure that we understood how public money was being used in the post-secondary system. And so we launched an indicators project to gather data from all the post-secondary institutions. In 2016, as the Minister mentioned, we launched these 5 expectations for post-secondary. We defined what each of them means. So we have a definition of what accessible, accountable, sustainable, high quality, and responsive means to the post-secondary institutions. Over the next number of years, we embedded those expectations into ministry budget letters, reports, and we saw those reflected back to the ministry from our various institutions. And then in 2020, we launched a performance framework that we built collaboratively with the post-secondary institutions. The framework involves indicators aligned to each of those 5 expectations. So, for instance, accessible means offering qualified people the opportunity to attend and succeed in post-secondary education. We then defined what that means in the context of Saskatchewan's post-secondary system. We identified a number of government priorities that are linked to that, including things like target groups like First Nations and Métis students, students with disabilities, making sure that the health, safety, and well-being of students, faculty, and staff is improved. And we also started to align that with various data points to understand how the whole sector in Saskatchewan was doing in terms of accessibility. So that's the crux of our performance framework. We're currently in development of the next steps of that framework, working with institutions to figure out which data they would like to associate with those expectations. So the performance framework is co-developed, and it's driven both by the ministry and by the institutions.
I guess stemming from that question and those answers, what metrics will be utilized under the performance framework?
So I can provide a bit more detail in terms of what the indicators look like that are coming from both the government side and from institutions. So as part of our data collection, we look at things like the number of credentials awarded to students in various programs, the enrollment of at our post-secondary institutions. And then equally, our institutions provide indicators back to us. So I have some examples here from the big three institutions, the two universities, and Saskatchewan Polytechnic. And these indicators both align with the government expectations and with the individual priorities of the institutions. So from the U of R, for instance, when it comes to accessibility, their indicators that they've provided to us focus on courses available outside of Regina and Saskatoon, speaking to the broad nature of post-secondary across the province. In terms of responsiveness, programs with work integrated learning component. When it comes to quality, they measure student satisfaction. For sustainability, they look at things like balanced operating fund, percentage surplus versus deficit. And under accountability, they look at administrative transparency. And so they've defined each of these terms for themselves. They track the numbers, and we work with them to self-assess where they're at in each of those cases. I can provide additional examples. For instance, at Sask Polytechnic, they look at, under accessible, the number of programs with flexible delivery. Under sustainable, the graduate employment rate. Under accountable, the graduate provincial retention rate. The U of S is looking at things like under responsive, experience-based learning for undergraduate students. Under sustainable, the number or amount of philanthropic support that the institution receives. So a wide range of potential indicators.
Thanks. I certainly have many more questions around this, but not enough time. So I would ask that the performance framework be tabled at the next meeting. Is that agreeable?
That's already online.
The performance framework was launched last year during our budget, 2021 budget, and it's included and is as the appendix to the budget letter. So it is available online, but we can always provide a copy of that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Like I said, I'm going to move on really quickly here. And so next question, Minister, is around a letter that I was copied on from the Saskatchewan Information and Privacy Commissioner to yourself, December 1st, 2021, where the Commissioner outlined a number of concerns and suggestions relating to Bill 61. And I am wanting to know if the concerns expressed by the Commissioner relating to the collection, protection, and reporting on student data were considered, and if so, will they be addressed by your ministry?
Hi. So I can provide a bit of a background on this one. We did receive a letter from the Privacy Commissioner raising some concerns about certain clauses in the bill. We followed up with the commissioner, had a very good meeting, had a solid dialogue on his concerns, and were able to address them in the meeting. So I can run through exactly what his concerns were. There was a desire to see more use of de-identified data, so data that doesn't in any way point to the individual. However, our legislation requires that we have that ability to use identified data. Our default, of course, as a ministry is to try, wherever possible, to use de-identified information, but there is a mix of identified data that does have to come into the ministry. In particular, we share this bill as well with the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training, and a number of their federal cost claims require that they identify individuals through social insurance numbers and other things like that. So we had that discussion with the Privacy Commissioner, noted that uniqueness about our use of the de-identified data, or identified data, sorry. And the Ministry of Immigration and Career Training also emphasized that wherever possible, they try to deal with consent up front, so it's very clear to anybody whose information is being used, how it's being used, and that they're clearly informed in advance about that information. The other piece that the Privacy Commissioner mentioned is that more of our institutions should be captured under the Local Authority Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, otherwise called LA FOIP. So that provision wouldn't be captured under advanced education's legislation. It would be treated through other legislation by the Ministry of Justice, so we dealt with that piece. Currently, there's 3 institutions in the post-secondary system that aren't covered by LA FOIP. Those are our Indigenous institutions, so First Nations University of Canada, Gabriel Dumont Institute, and the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies. So if government was to consider including those institutions, there'd have to be consultations with them undertaken by another ministry. And the last piece was just adding some clarity into our bill around the Freedom of Information Act and the Health Information Protection Act. And we felt that the clauses we included in our act were not in any way untoward or too broad, but we felt they met the needs of the ministries.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to my last question here before I move into a set of motions for amendments. I guess we're running short here, so if we can keep her tight. Throughout my consultations with stakeholders around this bill, concern was expressed by multiple stakeholders that the bill may create a mechanism for performance-based funding. And now I know the minister has stated that bringing in performance-based funding is not the intention of Bill 61. So my question to the minister, will the minister provide unqualified assurance that the ministry will not pursue performance-based funding for our province's post-secondary institutions?
So I guess what I'd say to that question right now, Mr. Chair and committee members, there's a couple points. This bill does not disallow, nor does it allow any sort of performance situation. That's outside of this bill, and so that's more of a policy or would be part of a appropriation from the government. That's sort of not what this bill is intended. We've certainly been over that. We do currently have a multi-year funding agreement, which I noted started in 21 and goes for 4 years, and that is what we've committed to for our term in government, and it has the parameters and what we've set, and we expect good collaboration between the ministry and the sector to continue. I would say with this bill, we've seen certainly in the media there is they are certainly on board with the multi-year funding, as I've mentioned earlier, but I would say Dr. Kesham from the U of R in an article, I'm quoting here, "I know this bill itself doesn't move in that direction, and again, it's a highly collaborative process with the government. I continue to look for that relationship that we have with government going forward. I would, past the 4 years, we'll certainly continue to work with the sector and consult with them as we go forward."
Okay, thank you for your response. I will note that I did not hear you, Minister, ruling out the possibility of the ministry bringing in performance-based funding in your answer. With that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my general line of questioning, and I'm okay to proceed from here.
Right. Proceed. Right, are there any more questions or comments from any committee members? Seeing none, we will proceed with the vote on the clauses. Clause 1, short title, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 2, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 3, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 4, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 5, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 6, is that agreed?
Mr. Chair,
Carried.
I'd like to make a motion to amend Clause 6.
Okay. Go ahead. Ms. Bowes has moved an amendment to Clause 6. Would you please read your amendment?
Yes, I would like to amend to create a new 6.3 of the bill to read as follows, and to immediately follow after 6.2 of the bill. Reads as follows: the minister shall not A, use student performance or achievement as a factor or indicia in any evaluation system, mechanism, accountability measure, term, or condition referred to in this act, or B, use student performance or achievement in any way to constitute a breach of any requirement of this act, any regulation, or any term or condition imposed on a grant or funding.
It's in order. All right, committee members, Ms. Bose has moved an amendment to Clause 6. Do committee members agree with the amendment as read? No. All right. If we could just do that again. Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed to the amendment, please say no. No. I believe the noes have it.
Mr. Chair, I would like to request a recorded vote.
Okay. A recorded vote has been called. The question before the committee is the amendment to Clause 6 proposed by Ms. Bose. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Ms. Bose? All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. Mr. Nerline? I don't have to, okay. Let the record show that all members of the government side that have voted against it.
Those in favor of the motion?
Favor of the motion? Oh, okay, yeah. Those in favor of the motion, 1. Those opposed to the motion, 5. The amendment is defeated.
Now you just sign.
We will continue with the original clause. Clause 6, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 7, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 8, is that agreed?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a
Carried.
motion to amend Clause 8.
Ms. Bose has moved an amendment to Clause 8. Ms. Bose, if you could please read your amendment.
The amendment is to Clause 8(1) of the bill, and the amendment is to strike out the words "performance and outcomes." Yeah, correct. 8(1)B, thanks.
Ms. Bose has moved an amendment to Clause 8(1)B. Do committee members agree with the amendment as read?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to request a recorded vote.
All right. Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to the amendments, please say no. I think the noes have it. A recorded vote has been called. The question before the committee is proposed by Ms. Bose. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. 5. The amendment is defeated. We will continue with the original clause. Clause 8, is that agreed?
Date.
Okay, Clause 9, is that agreed? Clause 10, is that agreed?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move an amendment, actually multiple amendments to Clause 10.
All right, begin with your first amendment.
The first amendment to Clause 10 is to Clause, 10(3) of the bill. So to amend Clause 10(3)C of the bill by striking out the words retention and completion and substituting the words "and retention."
All right, the amendment's in order. Ms. Bose has moved an amendment to Clause 10(3)C. Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. One. Those opposed to the amendments, please say no.
Mr. Chair, I would like to request a recorded vote.
All right, a recorded vote has been requested. The question before the committee is an amendment to Clause 10(3)C. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. One, Ms. Bose. Those in favor, or those against the amendment, please raise your hand. 5. The amendment is defeated. We will continue with the original clause. Clause 10, is that agreed?
I have a further amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Please state your amendment.
Further amendment is to Clause 10(3) of the bill, to amend Clause 10(3) of the bill by striking out Clause H in its entirety.
Clerk advises me that the most recent amendment is in order. Ms. Bose has moved an amendment to Clause 10(3)H. Do committee members agree with the amendment? Yes. Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed to the amendment, please say no. I believe the noes have it.
Chair, I'd like a recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote has been called. The question before the committee is the amendment to 10(3)H. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. 5. The amendment is defeated. We will continue with the original clause, Clause 10. Is that agreed?
Mr. Chair, I have one further amendment.
All right. Ms. Bose has a further amendment. Please read your amendment.
The amendment is to create, with Clause 10, new 6, and the following new clause after 10(5) of the bill would read, "Where practicable, only de-identified student information shall be collected, used, or disclosed for the purposes mentioned in Clause 3, if it will serve the purpose."
All right, thank you. In discussions with the clerk, we had some extensive discussions, and we have ruled that the amendment is indeed in order. So Ms. Bowes has moved an amendment to Clause 10, adding subsection 6. Do committee members agree with this amendment as read? No. Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed to the amendment, please say no. I believe the noes have it.
I would like to request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been called. The question before the committee is the addition of 10 subsection 6. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. 5. The amendment is defeated. We will continue with the original clause. Clause 10, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 11, is that agreed? Carried. Just make sure I got that one. Clause 12, is that agreed? Carried. Clause 13, is that agreed? Clause 14, is that agreed? Clause 15, is that agreed? Clause 16 coming into force, is that agreed? Committee members, Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, enacts as follows: the Post-Secondary Education and Skills Training Act 2021. A member to move that we report Bill number 61, the Post-Secondary Education and Skills Training Act 2021, without amendment. Mr. Nerline moves. Is that agreed? Carried. Minister, do you have any closing comments?
No, again, similar quick comments. Thanks, committee members. Thanks, officials, for your time tonight.
Thank you very much to the critic, to the minister, officials, and colleagues today. That concludes our business today. I would ask that a member move a motion of adjournment. Mr. Domitar, all in favor? Carried. Have a good evening.